Okay, so sauerkraut, and I think sauerkraut is probably one of the most well-known ferments, you know, on a hot dog, and there's actually so much more you can do with sauerkraut than, you know, having it on a hot dog. I love it on like eggs, or I like it in a salad, or I just kind of eat it. And the health benefits of sauerkraut have been touted for I guess like millennia, specifically in ancient Rome. They said that if you eat sauerkraut, specifically as a lactating woman, meaning breastfeeding woman, that it can help improve breast milk. It was also during ancient Roman times recommended if you were sick, having sauerkraut. And so sauerkraut has tremendous amount of benefits. So it's definitely another kind of similarly with the kimchi. It has similar properties because, again, sauerkraut is from a cruciferous vegetable, cabbage. You can also make it with red cabbage or any other kind of cabbage. So you're getting a lot of the benefits from that are naturally occurring in the cabbage, which is high in vitamin C, high in vitamin A, and then also, again, like the indole-3 carbonyl, and the added fermentation is going to enhance our body's ability to assimilate those nutrients. You know, I forgot about this part, is I think a lot of us associate you know, the limeys, you know, the sailors from old that would get scurvy, and how that they would bring limes and lemons to prevent scurvy. Well, actually, they brought sauerkraut. And the reason, again, is cabbage alone does have a high vitamin C content. You also, adding the fermentation is going to be shelf stable, or it's going to last a lot longer. And again, I mean, they might not have known this, but the bacteria actually enhances the absorption. So sauerkraut, some of the benefits besides things like weight loss, it definitely is really good for transit. So meaning if you are somebody who is prone to constipation, sauerkraut is definitely a vegetable or a fermented food to incorporate. Another benefit, studies have also shown that sauerkraut can be really helpful in H pylori. So H pylori is a bacteria that causes things like stomach ulcers. And basically what happens is when the H pylori actually changes the acidity of our stomach to make it more basic so that it can survive. And then it's when it's caused with that changing of the environment is when, well, a couple of things actually. H pylori does a lot of things. You know, it's going to cause acid reflux, and it's also going to cause stomach ulcers, and it's also going to actually impair our ability to absorb B12, because as I think I mentioned earlier in the presentation, that we need stomach acid to absorb B12, and so sauerkraut can be very useful. I did want to point out one thing about sauerkraut. So as like, I guess, a contraindication. So if you are somebody who is on either a low histamine diet, or somebody who is very prone to adverse reactions to histamine, sauerkraut does have a high histamine component. So that's just something to watch out for. And I want to definitely save time for the demo, but something also interesting, if you are somebody who's like worried about sodium, and you are going to start maybe experimenting with some fermentation on your own, there actually is a way to ferment cabbage into sauerkraut without salt. Basically, you can add kind of any already fermented medium. So a lot of people use whey, or you can even use kombucha. It'll taste a little bit different because it's not going to be salty, but if you are somebody who is really watching their salt, there are some ways around fermenting or making your own sauerkraut that actually don't involve salt. I think this is this should be our last ferment that I'm going to talk about. So this is actually a picture of me a few years ago when I was in Japan. I was in Okazaki, which is it's like the suburbs of Nagoya, which is like kind of like the Baltimore of Japan. It's not like a huge city. I mean, it's definitely a city, but it's not like the biggest city. And so I stumbled upon the Maruya Hatcho miso factory, and or it's kind of like, it's almost like an atelier. It doesn't really have like a, it doesn't feel like a factory, but I was there in Okazaki, Japan, and I actually had the privilege of meeting the president, Mr. Osai. So it's me and Mr. Osai. Miso has been around a long time. It's been around since 500 CE in Japan. Typically, it's a fermented product of soybeans, rice, and it's called koji. And basically koji, I mean, if you ever, actually, if you have time, or you can probably order it online, any Japanese market can sell koji. And it looks kind of like Rice Krispies. And basically it has these little spores of aspergillus. It's not just used to make miso, but it's also used to make things like amazaki, which is sort of like this sweet rice drink that was like kind of popular, I think in like the 80s and 90s, maybe probably more like 70s and 80s, that you find in like health food stores, which is actually the precursor of sake. So I have the two corners. You have two different types. So that is actually the one that's like more of the dark color. That is the Hatcho Miso, which is like a red miso. And then the other was actually made by my friend Akina, which is a shiro miso, which is like much more mild, light color. Miso has like a lot of different, like from a culinary standpoint, there's so much that you can do with it. It's just like one of my favorite applications if you're somebody who is wanting to decrease like butter. It can be like a really great like butter substitute, not from a like not cooking in it, but if you wanted to kind of bring out like a kind of a butteriness into like maybe mashed potatoes can be really good. Makes a great salad dressing. And I actually like it on like baked apples. Another kind of weird like comfort food is like mixing it with like some like almond butter and putting it in a sweet potato. Sounds weird, but it's like something I really like. And so traditionally miso is always made with those three components. But of course, you know, some people don't do soy, and so there's other versions that use maybe chickpeas. I have a friend, Cheryl Paswater, who runs Contraband Ferments, and I'm really lucky because I get to get all her amazing ferments, and she made me this really great red bean and garlic ramp miso, which is like to die for. I think I just eat it with a spoon. So yeah, so if you don't do soy, you don't have to necessarily have soy miso. There's other options. And so what are some of the health benefits? Even though this is kind of one of these weird things, though miso is very salty, so if you've ever had it, I mean, it's very salty, it has sort of, it actually can help with blood pressure. And there's been many studies showing its positive effects on blood pressures. And one of the thoughts is actually because of the sodium content, it actually inhibits some other absorption of sodium. That's one of the proposed mechanisms of why miso might lower blood pressure. If you are using soy miso, so the soy-based misos, not the other ones. Soybeans have a lot of genistein in it, and by fermenting it, you're making it more pronounced, and there's been very good studies around genistein and osteoporosis. Some other interesting studies that they've done with miso are around breast cancer. So there was a cohort study, and that the women who participated in that study, those that consumed more miso had a lower incidence of breast cancer. So miso can be definitely, I mean, not to say that it's going to prevent everyone's breast cancer, but it could be a good thing to add when it comes to cancer prevention.